If there's one thing Star Trek fans love more than debating the merits of the Kobayashi Maru test, it's speculating on the future of the franchise. Let's face it, the past few years of Trek's live-action offerings have been something of a mixed bag. Sure, Star Trek, Picard gave us some solid moments, and some we'd like to forget, while Strange New Worlds seems to have finally cracked the code for balancing fan service with episodic storytelling. But the future of Trek's overarching narrative might be taking us far, far away from the 24th century playground fans have come to love. And by far, I mean the 32nd century. So, let's unpack this. Why did Star Trek, Lower Decks and Star Trek, Prodigy get cancelled? Why does Star Trek, Legacy, the heavily teased continuation of Picard, remain little more than wishful thinking for now? And what does the decision to set Star Trek, Discovery's later seasons in the 32nd century tell us about Paramount's grand plan for the franchise? Spoiler alert, it all points to a calculated shift in Trek's narrative focus, one that Paramount probably thought was a genius move, but which might instead be a risky gamble on the future of the franchise. The 32nd century, infinite freedom or infinite laziness? The last 3 seasons of Star Trek, Discovery catapulted us to the 32nd century, a period of time so far removed from the traditional Trek timeline that it practically wiped the slate clean. This, of course, has its advantages. With 700 years of unwritten history between Star Trek, Picard and Discovery's 32nd century setting, the writers are free to invent new political landscapes, alien alliances, and galactic crises without being shackled by decades of continuity. Want to say the Federation collapsed? Sure, why not? Introduce a mysterious cataclysm like the burn? Go ahead. The 32nd century offers a playground of possibilities, unburdened by nitpicking canon-obsessed fans, well, mostly. But here's the catch, this clean slate also means sacrificing much of what made Trek great in the first place. Star Trek has always been about building on its own mythology, creating a sense of continuity and history that made its universe feel lived in. By jumping so far ahead, Discovery effectively abandoned decades of world-building in favor of narrative convenience. Why bother exploring the political ramifications of the Dominion War when you can just skip ahead to a time where none of it matters anymore? Why deal with the tricky ethics of synthetic life introduced in Picard when you can just say, that was 700 years ago? Who cares? This is similar to how Doctor Who was restarted without being rebooted in 2005. Paramount's decision to shift its focus to the 32nd century, and possibly double down on that era going forward, seems like an attempt to appeal to both longtime fans and newcomers. For fans, it keeps the franchise in the prime timeline, as opposed to the polarizing Kelvinverse movies. For newcomers, it means they don't have to sit through 7 seasons of Deep Space Nine or Voyager to understand the context. But in trying to please everyone, Paramount risks alienating both groups. Longtime fans feel disconnected from the franchise's roots, while newcomers are left wondering what all the fuss was about in the first place. Lower Decks and Prodigy, casualties of the 32nd century shift? The cancellations of Lower Decks and Prodigy hit fans like a phaser blast to the chest. Both shows brought something unique to the table. Lower Decks was a hilarious love letter to Trek's past, while Prodigy was a gateway for younger audiences to fall in love with the franchise. Their cancellations, coupled with the conspicuous lack of movement on Star Trek, Legacy, suggest that Paramount is reshuffling its priorities. If Paramount's goal is to shift the main narrative focus to the 32nd century, then Lower Decks and Prodigy may have been seen as distractions from that plan. Both shows were firmly rooted in the 24th and 25th centuries, continuing the legacy of the Next Generation, Voyager, and Deep Space Nine. Their very existence underscored the richness of that era, making it harder for audiences to invest in the 32nd century as Trek's new home. But here's the kicker, this move doesn't make sense. Lower Decks and Prodigy were critically acclaimed and had passionate fan bases. Cancelling them feels like throwing away perfectly good dilithium crystals in favor of an unproven experimental warp drive. Worse, it sends a message that Paramount is more interested in chasing an uncertain future than honoring its storied past. Discovery's failure to bridge the gap. Let's not mince words, Star Trek, Discovery was a polarizing series from the start. While it had its moments of brilliance, the show struggled to capture the character-driven storytelling and moral complexity that defined classic Trek. By the time it jumped to the 32nd century, it was clear that Discovery had become a different kind of show altogether, more concerned with spectacle and high-stakes drama than the thoughtful exploration of ideas. This tonal shift likely contributed to Discovery's cancellation. Fans and critics alike have praised Strange New Worlds for returning to an episodic format with a focus on exploration and character dynamics. The success of Strange New Worlds proves that there's still a hunger for traditional Trek storytelling. So why not build on that momentum with a series like Star Trek Legacy, which could continue the storylines of Picard while staying true to the franchise's roots? The answer, perhaps, lies in Paramount's mistaken belief that the 32nd century represents the future of Star Trek. But as Discovery's struggles have shown, setting isn't enough to make a show work. The 32nd century might offer narrative freedom, but without compelling characters and thoughtful storytelling, it's just an empty backdrop. What the future holds. So, where does Star Trek go from here? Paramount's apparent focus on the 32nd century feels like a gamble, one that risks alienating longtime fans while failing to capture the magic that made the franchise endure for nearly 60 years. The success of Strange New Worlds suggests that fans still want Star Trek to be Star Trek, a show about exploration, morality, and the human condition. If Paramount insists on prioritizing the 32nd century, it needs to find a way to incorporate those elements, or risk turning Trek into just another generic sci-fi franchise. Ultimately, the future of Star Trek will depend on whether Paramount can learn from its mistakes. Cancelling Lower Decks and Prodigy and shelving Star Trek Legacy might have been part of a broader strategy, but it's one that feels out of sync with what fans want. If the 32nd century is truly where Trek is headed, then it needs to be a future worth exploring. Otherwise, it might be time to set course back to the 24th century and pick up where we left off. After all, resistance to bad storytelling is never futile. The promise of Starfleet Academy. Assuming the new owners of Star Trek, Skydance, don't change course, the upcoming Starfleet Academy series, set in the 32nd century, is a clear indication of the shift in the temporal location of storytelling for the franchise. Before the sale, Paramount had pulled out all the stops for this project, assembling an award-winning cast, including Holly Hunter, Paul Giamatti, and Tatiana Maslany, and bringing back fan-favorite characters from both Discovery and Voyager such as Sylvia Tilly and the Doctor. The series promises to bridge the gap between legacy storytelling and a bold new direction, offering a fresh perspective on the Trek universe through the eyes of cadets training to become Starfleet's next generation of explorers. What's particularly exciting about Starfleet Academy is the sheer scale of its production. Early reports suggest that it will feature the largest set ever built for a Star Trek show, immersing viewers in the heart of Starfleet's headquarters like never before. This ambitious approach not only signaled Paramount's commitment to the franchise but also suggests that the studio recognizes the importance of blending spectacle with substance. By focusing on the ideals of exploration, camaraderie, and personal growth, Starfleet Academy could very well become the flagship series that Trek fans have been waiting for. If Starfleet Academy can deliver on its promise, it might prove that the future of Star Trek doesn't have to be tied to a specific timeline or era. Instead, it can thrive by staying true to the core values that have defined the franchise for decades. Here's hoping that Starfleet's future is as bright as the stars it seeks to explore.